So, you want a fast street car. You go out and get yourself a 1,000 horsepower ProCharger motor, stick it in your car, and you expect yourself to be the fastest car in the street. Well, in my opinion, that's exactly the wrong place to start. The back of the car is actually the place that makes the car go fast. I mean, you can have all the power you want under the hood, but if you don't have traction, you're not going to win the race. The way to get it to go fast is to make it hook. So today we're going to help this 93 Mustang out by putting on a bunch of killer parts from TRZ Motorsports. Box body Mustang is probably one of the best platforms to start with. I mean, every single component's made for them. Power plants, you could stick in them all day long. They're dirt cheap. It's a great car to start with. One of the things to note is this motor's a ProCharger motor, and it's a D2 supercharger. But when you look at the overall size of the volute, it just doesn't look like a D2 to me. I actually question whether or not it really is a D2. I think it might be one of the old cheater blowers. The motor's insane. It's a 1,000 horsepower motor, 900 foot-pounds of torque from one end of the RPM band to the other. This is, in my opinion, nearly undrivable. Torque is what moves the car, but 900 foot-pounds of torque on the street it's really insane. He's going to have his hands full. There's no doubt about it. Well, the first thing we did was put the car up in the air, get it on 4 jack stands, make it level and solid. Next would be to take the wheels and tires off and get them out of your way. The suspensions on these Mustangs are called a triangulated 4-link, and the reason they're called triangulated is the upper 2 control arms are on a severe angle. This keeps the rear end from going side to side. They use it in lieu of a Panhard bar or a Watts link or anything like that. All it does is make the rear end stay in the center of the car. The only problem with these kind of rear ends is it tends to when you put high horsepower at them to have a lot of body roll. The next thing we do is take all 4 bolts off of the suspension, break them free with an impact. That way it's easier to work with when it's time to take the arms out one at a time. After that, we like to take the shock absorbers off, lower the rear end so that you can get it in a spot where it's easy to work with. Take the springs out of your way. You want me to do the other side, or you want me to just support from the middle right now? When we jack the rear end up, we put it underneath the pan area rather than the front area where the pinion is. If you jack it up from the pinion, it tends to roll the rear end back and make it harder to line your control arms up. Pry bar, so you're fine.
Ooh, nice and rusty.
The first thing that you notice when you take a look at the original stuff, it's all stamped metal. The bushings on here are really worn out. They even have these holes through them so that the car rides smooth. But all that does is make it flex. I mean, if you have horsepower, that's the worst thing you can have is flex. Now, the TRZ components are all TIG welded together, tubular steel. Everything's beautiful, as you can tell. The back bushings are polyurethane with a steel insert. The front is Heim joints with spacers to take up for the difference between the stock bolt diameter so that you can still get away with using a large diameter Heim joint. It's just an awesome piece. Comes powder coated, looks gorgeous. The other cool thing about these things is that they're fully adjustable as far as length goes. Sometimes you have to adjust them in order to get the right pinion angle, or if you want the rear end to be in the car square, this is the way you start to make sure that everything is perfect. The upper control arm, if you ask me, is the one that really takes the brunt of the abuse. And if you take a look inside of this one, they've actually bored a hole through it, welded the inside of it on the outside of the tube, as far as welded the outside. And then they also have 2 gussets on there. There's also an adjuster in here that has left-hand, right-hand thread, so that all the adjustments for the pinion angle can be done while everything is still hooked up in the car. Really a neat setup. The rear end usually has worn-out rubber bushings on there. TRZ supplied the spherical rod end bearings that are really neat because they press into the stock location and then you just tighten them up like that. That's a really trick arrangement. Okay, the stock sway bars were always put on cars, if you ask me, almost as an afterthought. I mean, you could tell by its size and length, it's just a place that they can mount it in the car. Now, this is a sway bar. The metal that's here is good to handle torsional strength. Everything that's here is TIG welded and powder coated, gorgeous. The ends have been milled to fit the frame rails in the car. There's like an oil light or a bronze style bushing in the end with Zerk fittings so you could grease it while it's in the car. So now you have to weld the tabs on for your link bars, and then your link bars come off of your end to your sway bar. Really pretty basic, straightforward stuff. Stuff that could actually be done in your garage on the floor. This is not a thing that needs to be done at a chassis shop. This truly is something you could do yourself. Okay, now one of the things that people have been always afraid about when they see these suspension kits is, that's too confusing, where do I start? It's simple. Copy the stuff that came out of the car. Start there. So the first thing we're going to do is measure the center to center on the lower control arm. The way I do center to center is by measuring the front of the back hole, go to the front of the front hole. 17 5/8 is what I would go with. So now we're going to set our lower control arm length at 17 5/8, tighten them up, and put them under the car. 17 5/8, okay. In order to get the control arms in the car, sometimes it's necessary to jack the rear end up or down or wiggle it side to side. This is when it's helpful to be there with more than one person. It could be done alone, but sometimes that's just a pain in the neck. One hit. Next step is to test fit the sway bar inside the frame rails. You have to grind the areas clean because you're going to be welding in that area. Then we put the sway bar up in there and check it for end play. The sway bar had too much end play being side to side clearance. The kit is supplied with shims to take up that clearance. You don't want it to be overly tight, but you don't want it to be overly loose. Then we push the sway bar up in the frame tight, tack weld it in place. Once it's tack welded, seam weld all the way around the plate. The fit was amazing. It actually worked really well. So it's a nice fit and everything will be fine. I'm welding. Next step is to measure your links so that they're both the same length, and then attach them to the sway bar and have them hang. Jack your rear end up so that it's at ride height, and the point where your end of your link matches to the rear end, that's where you're going to weld your little tabs. You have 4 tabs that have a rounded end on them. That's to mimic the diameter of the axle housing. You'll be able to put one end on at a time, and then the other end will be exactly where it needs to be because you've measured both sides. So that's pretty much the simplest way to do it. And MIG weld those parts in place, and the job's pretty much done. Once it's at ride height, double check everything by tightening all your bolts. Put your shock absorbers back on. Put your wheels and tires back on. Don't forget to torque all your lug nuts. Put the car back down on the ground and take it for a ride. TRZ is also offering a rear suspension kit for the 05 and up Mustang. That's the S197 version. This kit has the cool sway bar like we just put on the Mustang, but it also has a panhard bar support that replaces the original one from Ford. It's a little like a stamped metal one. This is much stronger. It has a new panhard bar that the way they've designed it, it'll clear the aluminum covers like the TA covers. That's important. The newer Mustangs have the 3-link suspensions, so the upper control arm is all beefed up like this, and it has tubular lowers. Everything's there to do it. You got a fast Mustang that you want to make hook, this is the kit to put on it.